joining me, and thank you all for coming. So my name is Vít, and I'm bare metal freak on Twitter and GitHub. Let me start with a little bit of my background. So at high school, I was playing a lot of games and writing funny little programs in Pascal and Delphi. At the time, I thought that programming was way too much fun to be a real job, so I decided to go do something serious, and I studied physics. But 3 years in, I realized experimental physics was not really what I wanted to do. So I moved closer to the mathematical part of it, and I spent the last 2 years of my studies doing calculus. And I ended up with a degree from mathematical modeling. And about at the same time, I met a company called CA Technologies that just came to Prague and opened a local development branch. And I spent the next 9 years working on these giant computers made by IBM called mainframes, doing assembler. And one day I went into a pub and I met an old friend from university, and he was just opening a local branch of Silicon Valley startup and looking for front-end engineers. So I joined in as a front-end engineer with a very basic knowledge of JavaScript only. And 3 years later, we got acquired by Citrix for $200 million. And currently, I'm doing React, Typescript, and GraphQL. Today, I would like to introduce you to a fascinating language I've been following closely for the past 2 years, and running local meetups and doing dojos with a couple of friends. And I will not have enough time to go into the details of the syntax or the type system, which are the hallmarks of the language. So I will just do a quick recap for those who have never seen Reason before. So it looks like JavaScript. It compiles to JavaScript, and it comes from the same person that created React. So there's no surprise that Reason has a first-class support for React, and it's called ReasonReact. It's a type-safe bindings that allow you to write your React components just like you would do in JavaScript, especially with hooks now. So for about a month now, you can just write your React classes as functions in Reason and easily mix them with ReactJS or TypeScript components. You get a static typing from Reason, and let's have a look at what normal React component looks like. So here we have a SpaceX rocket called Falcon 9. It takes a single prop called launch, creates a conditional class to assign to reproduce that it returns, and the rocket has some payload it's delivering. It has a rocket and a fire to get us into the orbit. It's very simple. So let's take a look at what this looks like in Reason. It is a React component, and by convention, we call it a make. It's a simple function taking a single named argument called launch again. It's creating this conditional class again, and using this funny syntax for templating literals in Reason. And again, it returns a payload, rocket, and a fire component. But if you remember from the previous slide, there was a return statement that's missing on this particular slide. That's because in functional languages, typically the last expression in a function is a return value. So we don't have to type return here. So you see, the two are really close. So what are the benefits of using Reason in your application? You get statically typed codebase with very little or almost no explicitly typed annotations. You have a great interop with existing libraries, whether they are JavaScript, TypeScript, or Flow type. And with a tool called genType, you also get a cross-boundary type checking. So if you change your type on one side, either in Reason or in TypeScript or Flow, you get the error on the other side. It has first-class support for GraphQL. You probably know that when you're trying to type, statically type your web application, even when you type all your code, you still have a problem with the network layer, that the REST APIs typically don't provide you with good information about the types that they return. And GraphQL can solve this. So if you integrate Reason with GraphQL, you can get a fully typed front-end application. I will not have time to go into details in this presentation. Maybe Roman, if he has time at the end, may show you integration of GraphQL and Reason. And it is a blazing fast build. This might seem not important, but if you've ever tried generating types for TypeScript and doing compiles, you will know that it can take significant amount of time and badly influence program productivity. Okay, with all the pros, so what are the downsides? Why is not everybody using it yet? So it's relatively young. The editor tooling is not there yet. There are currently 2 plugins for VS Code, and the recent release of the compiler broke one of them. But there is an ongoing effort to unify this, and I hope, please don't quote me on this, but I hope that by autumn we'll get there, and the tooling will be great. Probably the biggest frustration when you start with Reason is that the parser doesn't support something called recovery. So if you place a semicolon in a wrong location, or if you don't place a semicolon in the correct location, you don't get a good error. You know, it takes a while to learn where to place semicolons. But once you do that, it's fine. But it can be very frustrating for people who are new. Aside from this, the Reason compiler provides great error messages, but you have to have correct programs. And it is not widely known, which is why I'm here. I'm trying to spread the gospel. And I prepared a small demo. We'll be helping SpaceX bring the internet to every corner of the earth by launching satellites. And we'll build a launch control application and launch a rocket. So you see on the left-hand side here, I have a launch pad that doesn't have any rocket in it. And on the right-hand side, we have a launch checklist that will be checking. And when we check all of the things that are ready, we'll start with a countdown and we'll launch the satellites. So let's take a look at what the app looks like. This is it. Can everybody read it? Or do I need to increase the font size? Okay, everybody can read it. Wonderful. So as I said, we have, we have a container, and inside of it we have the left part where our rocket will come. We have nothing in there right now. And the right part where we have our checklist and countdown. So you see this application is written in TypeScript. And we will add our Falcon 9 rocket. And we will write it in Reason. So I'm importing Falcon 9 from Falcon 9. And I'm going to use the utility I mentioned before called genType to generate TypeScript types to check across the boundary. And genType generates file that with a gen suffix. So I have this.
There's a typo there.
Oh, do I? Oh, thank you. Wonderful. Appreciate it. Okay, but there is no Falcon 9 module right now, so I'll have to create it. I'll create a Falcon 9.re, which is the suffix that belongs to reason. And the React components are just functions. So I'll do let make, false. I will not have any arguments yet. And I will return AD with a class name of Rocket. And inside I will have our payload, the rocket itself, and the fire to get us to the orbit. Okay. And you can see Reason is telling me that these React components do not exist yet. So I'm going to go write it. I'll create a new file again. Rocket.re. And this time I'm going to cheat a little bit. I already have a rocket component written in TypeScript that shows a rocket image. So instead of writing it from scratch again, I will import the TypeScript component here. So I will use genType to do that. genType.import. And the rocket is in a file called tsrocket. And it is a default export. And it is a React component. And I have to tell Reason that it's external. So I say external. It comes from a world outside of Reason. External make, and I have to describe the type because everything inside Reason is typed. I have to specify the type. So my rocket is taking no props, just rendering an image, and it's returning a React.element. So now I have my rocket, and I will go back to my Falcon 9, and you can see that the Reason compiler is no longer complaining about rocket. And I will do the same trick for payload and fire. So let me go and repeat it. So rocket, copy this. So create payload. And this comes from a TS payload module. And I'll create the fire component. Then, oops. And again, the same trick. It comes from TS fire component. So let me go back into my Falcon 9, and you see that Reason is now happy, and I've written this component. Right now it's just a function, so I have to add my annotation to say it's a React component. If you'd like to learn the reason for doing this and the details, grab me after the talk. I'll be happy to explain every single detail. I just don't have time to go into it right now. And I will return to my application and see that the gen file does not exist yet. So I have written a Reason component, but I have not exported it to TypeScript yet. So that's the thing I will do now. So go to Falcon, and I want to make it a default export. So I'll do a genType type and let the default equals make. Okay. right? Okay, I forgot the semicolon. You see? Okay, I didn't want to restructure it like this. So now let's go back into my app, and my component imports nicely. It's sitting here on a launchpad, so let's check our launchpad, and we have a rocket with a payload. So now we want to launch the rocket, so we will add a launch prop, and we want to launch the rocket when countdown is complete. So let me put it in here. And now we can see in action the type checking across Reason and TypeScript boundaries. I'm now in Reason, and TypeScript is telling me that the launch boolean prop is not on our Falcon 9, which was written in Reason. And this is thanks to genType, which is generating the types for us. So let's go into Falcon 9 and add a labeled argument called launch. And let's create a class. Launch class equals I'm not supposed to launch. It will be just an empty string. And when we should launch the rocket, it will say launch. In case you couldn't hear me back there, let me know. I may have a tendency to lower my voice as I'm focusing on the code, so just shout at me, all right? Okay. So now I have a launch class, and Reason is telling me that I have an unused variable. So I'll put it here in the funny syntax for templating strings in Reason. This will be a $launch class. Okay. Right. So in TypeScript, there are two ways to set up your project. Either you don't require type annotations everywhere, and a lot of things become NA, and you get very little type checking. Or you make it strict, and then TypeScript is forcing you to enter type annotation at every function boundary. So every function argument has to be manually typed, which is really tiresome, and I experience it every day, and I swear a lot, using the F words that the price effects guys have on their t-shirts. With Reason, that's not the case, because Reason is just a new syntax for a tried and tested language called OCaml that has several decades of type system research behind it. And it has a great type inference made by one of the pioneers of type system called Milner. And so here, Reason can see that I'm testing launch for boolean. I can have a look, and it tells me that launch is a bool, right? So it knows this is a boolean. I don't have to specify. And that's the reason why when you're writing code in Reason, you end up writing very little, if almost zero type annotations, because depending on the context, how you use your variables, the type inference engine will find out for you. If you end up in a conflicting situation that in two places you're using it differently, you can explicitly state your intent and say, I want this to be a boolean, and bool, sorry. And then it will take this as a fact and record the errors in other places, which is really great. Okay, so we have our rocket. We have launch. So let's try launching it. So nothing. So we'll have to take a look at the countdown component. ts countdown. And here we're going to need to use some timer facility in the browser, probably set interval and clear interval. And and we'll have to remember the time that's remaining to lines so that we properly display it. And that sounds like a job for a React hook. So I'll call it use countdown. And I will pass the interval to start from, whether to start run, and what to do when we get 0 on finished. Okay, and I'm going to cheat a little bit. I prepared the hook, and I've written it in Reason, and it's here. I don't know if you're following the personal blog of Dan Abramov, but if you do, you will know that when hooks came out, he spent a lot of effort to go and explain why certain things are harder with hooks than before. And he had a long article about how to make set interval properly operate with React component and hooks. So I'll go and try explain this little piece of code. So we are using useState and useEffect from React. The useEffect 2 here, ask me about it later. And we are going to use setTimeout and clear timeout from the browser API. We will have a function to decrement our counter. And we have our default export, the hook itself. That's taking 3 arguments, interval, run, and unfinished, as we've seen before. It's going to initialize the time to launch with the interval we are passing in. And it's going to use useEffect to do the counting. So useEffect takes 2 arguments. The first one being a function to execute after your component updates. And the second one being a list of dependencies when to rerun the effect in case something changes. So inside the effect, we're testing for run, whether the counting should go down to 0. And if it should, we check whether the time to launch is still bigger than 0. If not, we're done, and we call finished, which will launch our rocket. And if it is bigger than 0, we are going to call setTimeout and pass it a function that will set time to launch by decrementing it by 1. And we'll do this after 1 second. So we'll be decrementing by 1 after a second. And the return value from useEffect is a cleanup function. A function that will clean up whatever is set up in your effect when the component gets unmounted or when something changes that is specified in here. So this will just remove the timer. Okay. Any questions here? No? All right, so let's go back to our countdown component, and you see we don't have the TypeScript file to check for types yet, and that's because I haven't provided the genType annotation yet. So genType. Okay, now everything's cleanly compiling, and let's try launching our rocket. So booster ready, video ready, guidance ready. 10, 9. Oops. Nothing. So let's go back into the code and see what we did wrong. So the useEffect, as I said, takes 2 arguments. First one is the function to do the decrementing, which seems to work fine. And the second one is the list of dependencies, where you tell React when you want to rerun your effect. So here I specified interval I specify to run, so when we are supposed to run to do the decrementing, which is fine. And I specified interval, but it's unrelated to our hook. What we actually want to do, we want to rerun the effect when time to launch changes. After every decrement, we want to set it up again. So let me fix this bug and do a time to launch. And let's again. Booster ready. Fido ready. Guidance ready. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Lift off. All right. Hello. There's something very new in here. You see? The rocket returned.
It needs to be full now.
It's not compromised.
All right. Okay. So let me go back into the code. So I think I've shown you type errors. I also shown you that you can ask for types, and the tooling will tell you. It's right here, down here. So you know, most of us probably using VS Code, but for some reason I couldn't learn to work with it. So I'm using them. Go to definition is something I was told that I should show. So set time to launch, and I will go to definition. See works. So if you're an old school geek and you're using Vim or Emacs, you're actually covered. The support in these editors works very well. The thing that we are working on hard is the VS Code, because that's where the majority of front-end developers are. Okay, I think that's all from my little example here. So let's go back to slide. If you'd like to check out the project, it's right here on my GitHub. Okay, so again, what are the benefits of using Reason? You get a statically typed code with very little, if no, overhead of actually writing your type annotations manually. You have great interop with existing JavaScript ecosystem, which is a feature that completely differentiates Reason from other great languages like Elm, for example. Doing an interop with Elm is a complete nightmare. You get a first-class support for GraphQL and a blazing fast build. All right, so in San Francisco, there's a lot of things happening and reasons happening there as well. But I think after a lot of people have written their production apps in San Francisco, Chicago, Tokyo, Sydney, Singapore, Reykjavik, London, Vienna, I think it's time that we start writing production apps in Reason right here in Prague. So, jump to ship. Thank you.
For some questions, guys, if you have any. Any questions?
You mentioned some weird errors when you forget to put
Yes.
in your
So,
some example of that?
yes, that's exactly the thing that happened to me right inside of my Falcon 9. In here, I forgot a semicolon. And in this case, oh, statement has no semicolon, so this one actually works. Kind of works. All right. Well, yeah. I mean, or okay. So let me try. Well, now when I actually want to cause one, I won't be able to do it for sure.
The problem appears when you have.
Give me a second, Alexei. Sorry.
When you have the function called before.
Let's go to fire and place a semicolon here. Oh, that seems to work too. Semicolon here. Okay, so you see, I'm not able to break it. But to explain the problem, when you have a parser that's parsing source code, and at some point it finds out the place that it's supposed to see a bracket, and you have a different sign in there, it doesn't know what to do. It's a general problem of parsing things, because how is it supposed to know that there is a problem right in here and below everything is okay, right? So the way parsers deal with this, they at the point where they find a problem like this, they insert a random thing that should fit in. They know what should be there, so they pick the first thing that should be there, and then they move on. And this is something that's not currently implemented, but maybe Alexei can explain better. He's a better ReasonML. He's more experienced with Reason. Do you want to go for it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have an answer right away, but I think the problems happen when you actually have something which likes the function call before that. So not like, you know, something which ends with unit, with two parentheses.
But you see, Fire has no errors in here, but right here it's broken. So there is a problem somewhere that I caused by inserting the semicolon. But this is something that's being worked on, and I believe it will be fixed soon. Yeah. Other questions?
If not,
Okay, so then I have a question I wish someone asked.
okay, go ahead.
So the thing is, this all is great, but how do you start? Where to start when you have an app and you'd like to introduce Reason into it? So there is a great article by Javier from the Reason community. It's called Adapting Reason. So if you Google for Javier and ReasonML, I highly recommend reading this article. It describes two strategies. One of them similar to what Reading did with introducing Elm into their code base, and the other one what Facebook did to introduce ReasonML into the Messenger app. It's an interesting thing I haven't mentioned. The Messenger app is written now mostly in ReasonML.
Fully now.
Fully now?
Yeah.
I haven't noticed. Okay, time flies. Okay, and of course, if you have someone to help you with that, that's even better. So we are running Reason Prague meetups irregularly, and I guess sometime in June we'll be running a ReasonReact dojo, and dojo is a great format to learn. So I highly recommend that you sign up on meetup.com and get notified when we run our dojos. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.